Denial is a sort of crutch that humans created as a defense mechanism against feeling like they're being perceived as someone who is wrong about things. And when protection of the ego becomes the main function of the person's logic when they're forming their opinions about stuff, it's gonna cause some, well, if you have an overprotective defense mechanism for your ego, you're gonna see things as personal attacks, first of all. And anybody who challenges your logic is going to be considered an enemy. Now, all you have to do to get out of denial about something is realize that you do it. Maybe not in a moment where you're experiencing denial, but if someone can point at a moment that you were and say, ask you what you think it was now that you're looking back on it with hindsight. And then they point out, well, you're obviously capable of changing your mind about things. And once you internalize that, it won't be so scary to be wrong about stuff. So we're in a paradigm right now where denial's a big problem because basically the American government has been hijacked and the American people are not okay with it. And the hijacking is being done by people who won't acknowledge the reality of the situation, and they're manipulating and trying to distort the truth with language, and it's so obvious to the people who are not brainwashed that those people have no idea what they're talking about, and they're just emotional, hysterical, some cases. But they'll never acknowledge it. And so the species as a whole is going to see this mindset as a non-adaptive genetic trait. It's maladaptive to the evolution of the species. Therefore, it's going to be cut from the gene pool. And then we'll have, a planet full of thinking people who want to discern the truth from fairy tales. I am a person who has an insatiable appetite for mental stimulation. And this is a product of environment and a product of, human evolution, because the more you learn, the better you are at stuff. The better you are at stuff, the longer you live. The longer you live, you know what I mean? So also, I was raised in a generation where we all had constant entertainment from video games and TV and stuff. And so there was always something on or something to watch. So The knowledge that I have is based on what I know from the past, but it's also based on the way I think about things. Uh, for example, talking about stuff in general is laying the framework for a process that sort of takes its own building blocks and then creates something new, known as language. The way language functions is that the more words you combine, the more possibilities you have to describe situations and details and stuff. The more access, and to the point where there's access to novel information just based on the framework that you've laid by talking about anything. So new information can be emergent from the combination of different linguistic techniques or even habits and like rules and stuff. There's a whole thing called ruleology, which is a name that I hate, but basically says that with enough parameters, you can derive the laws of physics. With enough yes or no rules that things have to follow, you get a system of complexity that is describable with a language that represents the universe. It's like coding the universe by building up, like stacking a pendulum with another pendulum. Each one you put creates a new possibility of how the pendulum can behave. And so that's ruleology in a nutshell. If I'm not mistaken. So it depends on who you are. Everyone, though, needs something with which they can connect. And here's the thing, whatever that thing is real. If you connect with it, it's something that exists in reality. So everyone needs, and a lot of people have that be a memory or like a time period in their life. Some people have it be like a color or like a person. But it ends up being the fountain. It ends up being the foundation of experience. From a very basic level to very complex level. Because it's all one circuit. And it goes like this. From a dot, you get vibration. From vibration, you get polarity. Peak, trough, maximum amplitude, minimum amplitude. So this is now a switch, from point A to point B. Well, so if there's a point A and a point B, this insinuates dimensions. Because time has to go by for this transition between these ends of this polarity. And if it's a physical energy, there has to be a space for this to happen. Where is this happening? And, so imagine, like the dot is like phasing between a star and a dot. Star, dot, star, dot, star, dot. this existence of the space and the time between the ends of this polarity is where awareness comes in. Because it is alive. To have created living entities, the universe must itself be alive, or life itself is an emergent property of random fucking circumstance. But either way you look at it, the space that this is happening, along with the time that it is happening, is represented as a line, because this dot can now move through space-time. So the specific polarity that I use is like a line, grayscale, on one end black, on one end white. And there's like something moving constantly between the two, and that's which one is selected. So that's what you have in step, 2 or whatever we're on. All right. So observation of this process is what now is the foundational root, because observer is the center of all things. And that's really what this is about. It's about the evolutionary process of the observer and their surroundings, but you don't want to split it. You don't want to look at them as separate. You want to see the transformation that you witness out there as a reflection of what's going on, within you. And so this is a self-transformative process that takes a person from not realizing that something is happening to being aware of not only your spatial, temporal surroundings, but beyond them into 5D, which for the history of human beings has been the difference between being dead and being alive. But I have my own theories on this, which we'll come back to. This line becomes a circle. The front end of it, the black end, lines up with the white end. The two polarities exist simultaneously. Therefore, it's a circle. Now, this process is sacred geometry, but what it does is it takes awareness from a focal point to a two-dimensional space to a three-dimensional space. And how we get there is the circle. A circle is two-dimensional, but if you move it like this, you can sort of trace out a sphere. You know what I'm saying? If you move a hula hoop around and have the center of gravity be the middle of the hula hoop, the circle, you can move it around and sort of emulate a sphere. Now, here's the thing. Infinite circles will not give you a sphere. You can have infinite circles and still have no sphere because they're just points of reference on the surface of a sphere. But if you watch how it transforms, you will see that it goes into four-dimensional awareness, which is represented as platonic solids over time. So if you are where everyone mostly thinks that all of this takes place, you are in platonic solid dimension number 4. Now here's where my theory comes in. We're drifting towards 5-dimensional reality. And what that insinuates is that the whole fucking universe is kind of like a force field bubble shape like this, but it's got a hole at the top that sinks in like a drain that connects all the way to the bottom and opens back up at the bottom. And it's also moving in ways that are hard to comprehend because it can intersect itself and like phase through, and it has faces that are lower dimensional, which is the one that we can sort of get glimpses around. It's moving in such a way that we can peek around corners and see its five dimensional aspects like colors and shit. And we can, you know, we can have certain things, but that's only based on our positioning in this toroid, you know? And so there's a line of connection between the dot from the beginning of this story and the toroid, which is a five-dimensional shape if it exists over time. And what I think is happening is it's either a metronome that swings back and forth, or it circles all the way around and then ends up back at the beginning. But that's where the singularity was. That's where the dot was. And so the only things that really exist are awareness and this dot. And this cycle happens so frequently that it creates a physical universe that when you are expanding, inflating away from the center of it, all the available chi becomes baryonic energy. The universe goes from opaque to translucent. You know, things start particling out and planets and patterns form and stuff. But the baryonic energy, the electrons and stuff, are only on the inside of this universe, this shape. But the outside is the inside. And so things function out there a little bit differently than they function in here. But they are the same. And anybody who knows where hallucinations, you know, come from because they've been there or had them, anybody who has theories on this will acknowledge five-dimensional shit, because they'll be like, oh yeah, I saw this crazy hypercube. Or maybe not anybody, but people who do psychedelics, you know, have seen into this. And to me, it's bringing back the thing about death. Because if that's where we go when we die, what is heaven? Does heaven not unwind when it passes through the, you know, different phases of this universal distance from the center? I mean, if we go from physical reality to hyperspace, what is keeping heaven on the, because death might not be a paradigm always. In hyperspace, do things die? Where do they go then? Where do things that die go when they die after they get out of here? And so it's like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. Heaven might be just one eternity that is specific to those who do good. Human beings on Earth, you know, maybe aliens too. But like, you shouldn't be able to get in there if you're a bad person. But if you die and continue on the outside of the toroid, so it's a map that goes deep that I don't fully claim to know the whole comprehensity or whatever of it, but I would imagine that when people say eternities, that would suffice. I mean, that would, you know, that would usurp all things within the day-to-day human life, you know, as far as the magnitude of, like, you know, beginning and end paradigm. Like, being eternal and infinite would definitely be a lot better, in my opinion, than having a beginning and an end, is what I'm trying to say. But I see stuff seep into this reality. Other people see their own things. But The only real evidence I have of this is that a lot of other people believe it too. And sometimes when I talk about it, I can feel the chi. It's like a warm, fiery energy. It just like hits me. Sometimes I see it as like colors. Um, but you go from dot to line to circle to sphere, and the way you get to sphere is thinking about hyperbolic surfaces. Like, imagine if you were inside of a cube and then you carved out a sphere from within. You know what I'm saying? Imagine what the surface of that sphere would have to look like in order for you to get the right shape. You know, like take out a chunk of a sphere and then look at it like a bowl and look at the properties of that bowl. And so it's a weird thing to try to imagine. But if you can see the transformation, it can happen in your mind. You know what I'm saying? It can happen in a fucking lighter, but you'll be able to see it. Like, look at it straight on. Okay, you see it as a flat thing. Now realize, you know, that it has up and down. Okay, now realize that it has left and right. Now realize its texture. There's a depth to the texture, you know, absorbing certain colors. And the color is the parameter that comes in that makes it, you know, a platonic solid. Because all platonic solids have colors that are actually just human perceptions. But if you're going to change something about it, you know, if you can't change its length, you can't change its width, its depth, you need to change a different parameter. And so what do? You change